And I'm Still Here project is something that I've had on my heart for a number of years. I got this idea about having a coffee table photo book with about 10 people's stories talking about near death experiences, going through that question of why am I still here? Like I was given a second chance. I was, you know, having the opportunity to keep on going for whatever reason. It's crazy how I work on so many other people's projects that I've put this one on the back burner for so long. But there's been just a circumstance after circumstance that motivates me to get this thing closer to completing or at least launched. And that's the step that I want to get to is the launching part. I've officially released stuff to social media. I've launched the website, but it's time to make some video content about the heart about this project, my vision for it, and just some things to expect. And to be honest with you, just like my website says, like this is under development, and I probably will never change that part of the website just because, I mean, it's just so reflective of our lives that we're constantly adapting, adjusting, and trying to figure out why we're still here. And I'm still here. I'm still here. Where is that phrase? Where does that motivation come from? And that's what I want to kind of go over with this video. If you've known me for a while, you've probably heard my story, which deals with an attempted suicide that I failed at, which obviously I'm still here. I'm so punny at times without even meaning it. So literally, I literally say those words just naturally, and that's kind of like how it just kind of hit me one day. I was trying to come up with this campaign, this idea, some sort of title to make this all come together, and that's just literally something that has stuck with me ever since that experience. So I want to kind of back up into that experience, give you some context, my story, and you're going to hear my story in different ways. I'm going to release things in different formats in a sense to where you can kind of see pieces as they come. I'm going to glance down at my phone at times too because there's just notes and details that I typed out that I don't want to forget. And even after the fact, after I got done publishing this, there's a few details that I meant to include. I need to go back and do that. But let's talk about my story. And it's kind of like, I feel like I need someone interviewing me so that they can pull stuff out. I'm so used to interviewing others. My senior year of high school, it was a pretty difficult year. Back 2001 at this point, it's been that long. Uh, the fall semester before spring when I graduated. Anyways, the that time frame in my life, I got to a very, very depressive state. And it was a buildup. There's a lot of explanations. There's things that I look back at now that I can see how it contributed to where I was. Things that could have contributed to the depressive state that I ended up being in was the loss of loved ones that, it wasn't that year particularly, but things that kind of built up to that point. There was a breakup of my girlfriend at the time. There was things that I think contributed to the negativity, such as the music I was listening to, not seeking help or not knowing how to seek help or knowing that there was even a way out of depression. I would consider that religion in a sense because of how involved I was with the church. I grew up as a pastor's kid. I was the type of person that just like I had a guilty conscience if I was doing something wrong. I would try to do my best to do the right thing at all times. I was the kind of person that I try to live by integrity. That's one of the pride points I would say, just with my upbringing, but also being in JRTC. There was a lot of people that put trust in me. I was in youth leadership. So I guess like all that kind of pressure, I didn't want anybody else to see that I had this going on. I also had anger issues, which that wasn't really that hidden. My family, my parents and brother definitely would be able to attest to the anger issues there during that time period. And then also, and this is one of those like red flags kind of thing that I wish I could have communicated to my friends at the time, because there would be times where we would just get mad and we get mad together. We would find things like hard foam that we could punch, and we would get to the point where our knuckles were bloody, and we thought that was okay. And that, I mean, it was like a release in a sense during that particular moment, but it was not something that I needed to let continuously build up. So as you can see, you can kind of see how this package just really started to snowball together. And what ended up happening was I would go home after school. My parents worked normal business hours. So once I got back home from school, I would just go to my room and sulk there. I would get to my floor in the middle and be on my knees, be on my face, just kind of like not like rocking back and forth kind of thing, but just kind of like curled up in a ball and very tense. I would, in a sense, be very quiet, but at the same time, is very just disturbing, disruptive, tense within. So, I didn't want to make any kind of rackets where someone would come in and see how I was behaving. I would do that after school. I'd, get myself put back together, do whatever else during the day, dinner time, activities, whatever it was. And then at times at nighttime, before bedtime, kind of in a way, I would get in the same way. Like I'd either have dinner, then I'd go back to in my room, and the same kind of heaviness. And every time that I did that, it would just progressively get worse and worse. It'd be like one of those times where I just wanted to be left alone. It went from that kind of, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but just the way it progressed, it would just be like as if I was just sitting there, and then I would progress each time to get that into that heavy, tense behavior. So it got to a point where it was mentally and physically just painful. I didn't want to go through that pain anymore. I didn't know why I was going through that. It was something I didn't want to deal with anymore. This is the point in the video that I'm going to say this is a trigger warning from this point. If you are sensitive to detailed material concerning suicide or even self-harm, anything in that regard, please watch carefully and listen carefully. You don't have to proceed anymore. If you would like to contact me outside of this video, feel free to do so, and I will do my best to give you a version that is not as detailed. I feel like I can speak this better than I can type it. When I was typing out this testimony and experience, I was quivering inside, not in a bad way, but some of the moments that it brought me back to, it's very feels. Before I get into that state of mind that I was in, I wanted to back up with a detail that I wish I'd have known better at the time of how to handle it, because it was not good. My freshman year, I took Latin. I think it was my freshman year. It was freshman or sophomore year, either way. Early in my high school career, I took Latin. And I remember one of the class times that the teacher was, I don't even know how we got on the subject, but was talking about how if you're going to cut your wrist or arms, don't go, I don't even know if I want to say this because I don't want anybody else getting the idea. If you cut a certain direction, it's not going to do as good. It would be more of like a self-harm kind of thing. But if you really want to do the job, you would go another certain direction. And so, I didn't really think of anything at the time, but if I'd have known better what I know now, I would have definitely brought this conversation up to my administration, and I would probably even go after his job at that point, because that's just not something that you talk about to a group of high school students, teenagers. It's just nuts to me. But I would also want to know, like, why are you sharing that information? Was that his cry for help? Was that, something that he struggled with? I don't know. Or was he just messed up in the head? It's no telling at this point. hopefully he's good. I didn't see him beyond that class. So I didn't do well in Latin, so I didn't take it again the following year. So I don't even know what happened to that teacher. And I'll bring that scenario back up in a second. And the reason why I even say all that, it gives you some context. So back to where I was going into my room, I was in the depressive state. I was getting to a mindset to where I didn't want to struggle with this pain anymore. And so I started having suicidal thoughts. It was like, how can I get this to stop? My first reaction was to take a knife to my arm. And guess what direction I started? I will say that because that was going to be painful, I didn't want more pain. So I withheld from proceeding any further that way. Fortunately, I didn't go through with that kind of stuff. And again, I didn't want to experience any more pain because that was part of the problem, pain. So things got escalated because I was like, if that's not a way that I can, we didn't have firearms in the house. We didn't have anything that would be anything quick, to be blunt. And so I, for a few nights dragged on, still in the depressive state. I would write notes, but then destroy them because I would just get to a point where okay, I'm not going to do this, but it was still like this very much back and forth kind of thing. It got to a point where I thought about just hanging myself. And one night, it was, I think it was around dinner time kind of period, is that I took a belt. It was the woven kind, and I put it to my closet rod, and then I put it around my neck, and I let my weight drop. I thought I would cough a few times, kind of like almost like putting the knife to the wrist. I got to the point of getting that far, but then pull back. So like, again, with that kind of mindset, I thought I would cough a few times and let myself go, brush myself off, pretend like nothing happened, and then go back to normal life. But that didn't happen. Once I let my weight down, I blacked out immediately. And so at this point, all I can tell you is what other people told me. Setting the scene a little bit more, I'm in my bedroom. My parents and my brother are in the living room watching TV or something like that. They hear this pounding sound, whether it's a thud, I think it was just one thud kind of sound, that got my parents' attention. And so my mom walks in to check on me, and all she saw was my legs basically out from the closet floor area. And once she turned the corner, she could see that, I was hanging there. My dad and brother come in, and my brother tells me that he cut me down with scissors to the belt. And my dad was trying to get me to wake up. It was at that point where it was like the Twilight Zone. That's the best way that I can kind of explain it and describe it. It's like how you see in the movies when someone's trying to wake up. If you can imagine the first person view, your eyes are blinking, trying to open, trying to wake up. Everything is very foggy. And as you can imagine, the blood is starting to rush back to my head. And all I remember is looking up and hearing my dad, Josh, wake up, just pleading and begging for me to wake up. Once everything cleared up, I realized what was going on, and I broke down. I didn't realize it would actually work. So it's literally a miracle of why I'm still here. That thud that happened, there's theories that my body reacted a certain way, but either way, I'd counter God intervening of why I'm still here. It's literally a miracle. But when I woke up, again, my dad is over me and, sobbing, begging for me to come back to life in a sense. I don't know if I was gone, but I mean, I came back too. I don't even know how long I was hanging there. And I remember sulking. I remember feeling deep shame, being embarrassed. I didn't want anybody else to know that I was actually going through such pain. And I remember the police coming into my room. I remember standing next to my dresser, kind of like in a corner position, and not knowing what was going to happen next. The police officer, I remember questions like, do you know what happened? Do you know what you did? And that it wasn't good. And, that kind of, not in a shameful way, like he was, getting on to me kind of thing, but helping me understand the heaviness of what just happened. But then I was also like informed, like I had a choice to willingly go with them or not. And so, I didn't know what that going with them really meant, other than I was going to end up having to go with them somewhere. And so I remember replying back, I don't really have a choice, do I? And, obviously their response is like, you do have a choice, but like, I'm not gonna walk out of the house in cuffs or something. I remember getting into the back seat and there not being any leg room. I'm a tall guy, and that's just one of those details that I guess I'll never forget. That there was just not much room to work with. I remember that just being a very uncomfortable ride. The ride went to a behavioral health center, and that's where I spent 3 days and 3 nights at this local facility in Gainesville, Florida. A little side note is that I ended up getting a crisis counseling psychology degree from Liberty University. And then I also worked with Spectra Care Health Systems here in Dothan for a few years. And through some of the studies and experiences, I ended up learning about how some facilities and some regulations, you're only allowed to keep someone for so many days. And that kind of piece goes into later on in the story. So I get there and I don't remember all the days. Like I know it's 3 days and 3 nights. I remember that, some of the different circumstances, but some of it was just kind of like a blur in a sense. But I do remember the first day, I'm still going through kind of like the shame side of stuff, that I did something that was very bad. Not in like, you just feel bad for doing it, not in a sense of you feel condemned kind of thing, but just knowing that something horrible because of my action. Moments that stuck out from that whole experience at the behavioral health center was, I remember it was this whole experience, by the way, happened about a couple weeks before Thanksgiving timeframe. So during that time period, that we were doing activities that had to do with thinking about what you're thankful for. So could have been good timing in a sense, if you think about it, just to try to help realign, you know, things that good things that, things that I am thankful for, even though I was going through such a hard time. I remember just doing activities that would help bring that kind of stuff out. Other things, I remember shooting hoops. That was something that I like to do. If you know me, I love basketball. That's one of my favorite sports. And so shooting around was an activity that I remember doing. And then other times was sitting with nurses, counselors, and my youth pastor's wife, Becky, my parents. Most of the time, they were there as much as they could have been throughout the whole day of when they could be there for visiting hours. Justin would have been there, but he was at the time dealing with his own health issues. And I know that he would have been there if he could have been. And just know that meant the world to me, anyways. Justin and Becky at the time, even before this whole suicide attempt, they really took me underneath their wing and was there for me in a number of different ways. So they still mean a lot to me to this day. But like we're having those meetings, they're going through the different sessions with me to try to uncover what was going on, try to get me the help that I needed, and figure out what the next steps are. I remember having appointments with the psychologist, the doctor that was there, and I don't know, like it was one of those things that I never connected with that person. It was one of those kind of things where that person would come in maybe for 10 minutes max with me each day, ask some discovery questions, and then go about his day. So it was just kind of confusing to me at times. And then there was my pastor, Ken, at the time. And I don't mean any kind of negativity towards him. Some people just need better training with counseling people. But especially if you're in a pastor position, I'm going to leave that alone. I do have opinions, but Pastor Ken came in, and I just remember him asking and basically telling me, you know what the Bible says about suicide. And that was the tone that he had with that conversation. It really wasn't much of a conversation because I was just like, um, can you just leave? Like, that's not the kind of thing I was there for. So there's that. I'm not going to go much further detail about that, other than saying there's way better ways to have a conversation with someone that literally is lucky to be alive, and you don't bring up religion in that sense. Just don't do that kind of stuff. Um, the Bible says a lot of stuff, doesn't it? But that's another conversation for another time. However, you look at the contrast, like with Becky, that showed up with care, with emotion, with love instead. So, I mean, even though Pastor Ken wasn't the best experience in that kind of way, I did see the other contrast, which was a good thing. So I'm glad I didn't just experience the negative one. If I just experienced that, man, could I have moved forward like I did? Other context to the 3 days, 3 nights was, any kind of strings, whether it was shoes, hoodie strings, things like that, I was not allowed to have for obvious reasons. Um, so that was kind of an interesting thing to me, but something even to this day, and I'm a little OCD, and subconscious kind of stuff goes on, that they would have to leave the door cracked at nighttime. It was never shut. I never felt like, I don't know, it was one of those things like I literally felt like someone was always watching me. And for obvious reasons, in those kind of environments, you have to have those kind of precautions. But I would also be checked on every hour. And I feel like I would wake up every single time that someone would come in. So trying to get rest during that time period was not a very good thing, but also just literally having that feeling of someone watching you. So even to this day, I, at nighttime, have to have all the doors shut. My bedroom door, closet door, and bathroom door all need to be shut. If it's open, I can't sleep. I just can't do it. It's weird. It's like I would say PTSD kind of thing along with OCD, if you can understand that. Other things I didn't like was I was put on medication. I didn't like the idea that drugs would control my behavior, how I thought, how I would react to things. So at the time, I didn't really like that. But I would say it was a good thing because it was kind of like a reset button in a sense. This whole thing, like I didn't want this to be part of me. I didn't want this whole experience to be attached to me at all. So I ended up just like a flip switch in a sense, a reset button. I wanted to do whatever I could to move forward. I wanted to do whatever it took to get out of this whole situation. I didn't want to be in that facility anymore. I didn't want to be on drugs anymore. Um, and I just needed to get home. And so I was very motivated to get better. So about the third day, and this is again going back to some of the information that I learned later on in life, that I don't know if they would have kept me longer, but there was a conversation that I had with the doctor, and the conversation basically went like this. It's like, I looked at him in an angry way, not like yelling at him or anything like that, but just very blunt and bold, saying that I don't understand how you can come in here for a few minutes, make some judgments, and then tell me I can't go home still. Like I was ready to go home. I feel like I need to be able to move on. And I would get frustrated because it's like I would not get any kind of indication when I was going home. I told her, it was like, how can you make these kind of judgments when you're not with me throughout the day? Like, ask the nurses, ask the people that I've been in counseling with. Like, I'm doing better. Like, I can go home now. So I feel like my bluntness made a difference. And that day I was released. So I'm going to stick to it that standing my ground actually worked, but it could have also just been they couldn't keep me any longer, anyways, which is a whole other conversation for another time with mental health institutions. So this is where I kind of want to ramp up into my healing and where I finally found some freedom. For the next several weeks, I was still on medication, which I still didn't like. I can't remember exactly how I got off of that. I was going through counseling as well, and the counselor was a Christian counselor. I remember it was the whole setup was like in a kind of bright and airy kind of area. It was like a Florida room, and if you know what a Florida room is, it's an outside porch that's not necessarily screened in, but has glass. But I remember going out in a porch area. Uh, the furniture was light and airy. I'd say light and airy. I never described it like that, but if you're a photographer, you understand that lingo, light and airy. It's just a style of photography. But anyways, I remember there was a, stereotypical picture that you would look at and you would have to interpret kind of stuff. And I would say it was kind of interesting. I remember some of the times like my answer would change at times, like mood kind of stuff. But I remember going through conversations. I remember the counselor being very nice. And by the way, the nurse staff at the behavioral health center were very nice. I felt like they cared. I felt like they helped me get through some of that whole experience. So I want to give props to them. But the counselor that once I got home and all, I remember her just being very kind. I remember her being understanding. And I remember things like her trying to bring out stuff that I cared about so that way I could maybe focus on that as a part of moving forward. I remember there was a Franklin Graham crusade that was coming through that she encouraged me to be part of the people that would pray for others and help, pray the prayer of salvation and stuff like that. And I actually ended up being able to do that. And I think she was one of the ones that helped connect me to be able to do that. So that was pretty neat. But I got to a point where, again, I felt like, yes, counseling was good. The medication, looking back now, I felt like it did bring balance to my mental state. But I got to a point, I remember having conversations with my mom. I'm like, I don't want to do counseling anymore. I don't want to do medication anymore. I want to be able to make these decisions like on my own. And so, eventually I got off medication. I got off of the counseling. Fortunately, I still had a pretty good support system from like my youth pastor, Justin and Becky, my parents, of course, and a few close friends. And around that time period, the few weeks into everything, I did end up telling a very select few friends about what happened. I believe that they needed to know what was going on. That included Daniel, Wes, Buddy, and Garrett. And then I actually told the ex-girlfriend at the time too, because at that point in time, I felt like it was important for her to know too. And not like I was blaming her kind of thing, so don't take it that way. It was just people I were close to that I wanted to know that experience. But what was interesting to me was, I want to say it was like from the time period when I was at the Behavioral Health Center to a few weeks in, the advice that I got, or I don't know if advice or just, this is if you don't want to tell people about what happened, you could just tell them that you were sick. And so, like, that's the story that I stuck with for a while. And part of the problem with how I even got to the pain that I was going through was keeping stuff in. So it's kind of interesting that I was being told, you don't have to tell anybody this. You can just tell them something else. And lying just did not sit well with me. That's not the type of person I am. That's not the type of person I was. So, like, progressively a few months later, as you can imagine, the school year, the attempt was back before Thanksgiving, get through the holidays and, keep on chipping away at the timeline. It gets to be about summertime, so school's out and it's youth summer camp time. So that was a big deal. I loved those things back during youth group times. It was very good connecting points. It was great restart buttons. It was a lot of good things that happened, especially with my youth group. I had the best youth group you could ask for back in that time period. And so that summer, I believe it was Student Life Camp. That's one of the main ones that we went to. And we would break out into these church group times. There's all these different sessions that happen. And then there were times during the day that we, as our own church group, we would come together, have times of sharing, lesson points, things like that. So I remember Beth, one of our youth group members, she was in tears sharing the story about how she had a friend back home in Gainesville that was contemplating suicide. She was talking about taking her life, and Beth did not know how to handle that kind of stuff, and it broke her heart knowing that her friend was going through that kind of thing. My phone about dropped. While she's sharing this, I remember looking over at Justin and making eye contact. And, obvious reasons, like, Justin's one of the ones that knew what was going on. And I was starting to just get rattled inside. Um, when I care deeply about something and when I have to, I don't know, I feel it quivering inside of me. It's one of those things I get like this nervous feeling. And that time wrapped up and stuff, I remember taking Justin to the side and I was like, I feel like this is a time I need to share what happened. Like I need to share with the whole group about what happened with me a few months ago. And the heart of that was like I wanted Beth to know that, from someone that went through a suicidal attempt and survived it, about just the things that kind of matter to someone like that, or at least to me, to maybe hopefully get her some encouragement of how she could help her friend out. Like that was the heart with that. But again, like I didn't like lying. I didn't like shoving that whole experience to the side. Like I don't know. It's just still doesn't sit right with me of how. Not like I'm mad about it. It's just I couldn't deal with it anymore. I couldn't keep it hidden anymore. I needed to share what was going on. And so I want to say that I can't remember the exact timeline with stuff, but I feel like that was one day we went through the normal day of stuff the next day, and it was like the evening session of when I shared my story. And that was the moment that I I felt my freedom. And there's so much power in sharing your story and your experiences because I firmly believe like when you share your struggles with someone else, whether it's just one person, a few people, a group of people, that you give someone else the opportunity to have their freedom. I can't tell you how many times, like years later, I got this tattoo. It's the semicolon in the suicide prevention community. It's just your story isn't over, and like that meant a lot to me. I can't tell you how many times like that has just opened up the conversation to let someone know that I dealt with that too, and um, again, just kind of go back to that experience, like it lifted off of me. And I don't, if I didn't speak up, if Beth didn't speak up, I don't know where I'd be today. How much longer I could have gone with keeping that secret. But that night, like I felt free. I felt like I could actually move on and not have this black cloud over me anymore. So I remember after that time of sharing, I had all the support from my friends at that point, from all the people in my youth group. People were proud of me for speaking up. I was shown love. I wasn't shown like, do you know what the Bible says about suicide? But people were there understanding. And, I remember talking to Beth. I'm like, I don't know from what I shared if it's going to help you, but I hope it does. And if there's anything that I can do, I'm here for you. The next morning, Justin did an activity that, again, is a mile marker for my healing that occurred during that time point. He used to carry around this 9-inch nail that represented a nail that Jesus had during his crucifixion. And what we would do, we would hand that nail off to someone and give them an encouraging word. And then that person would take it to someone else and give an encouraging word. And you can kind of see how that was passed around. It was a great activity. Highly suggest it for all kinds of scenarios. He didn't have that nail with him this time. So what he had us do was draw a cross on the hand. And so long story short, we're all sharing and stuff like that. And I had a handful of crosses. Because I already had one, people would draw another cross around that one. And, I remember sitting there on the floor, people will come up, look me in the eyes, and, just give me the best words of encouragement that you could ever want when you're sharing something like that. So having that kind of support meant the world to me. I'll never forget it. And again, it's just like that. If I didn't go to that camp, if I didn't have people in my life like that to, be obedient to what God was telling them to do, if I didn't speak up, and if Beth didn't speak up, if all those things didn't play into that whole picture, man, would I have ever experienced freedom? And obviously, life happens. Life is hard. But what I'm so thankful for is that even though in the hardest times that I've had, even since that point, I've not reverted back to that kind of pain. Again, I've had some really hard stuff that has happened since then, but I've not had suicidal tendencies or thoughts. Man. However, man, this is where like there's going to be so much more content that's going to come from this because I'll tap into a little bit of this motivation behind this next thought and statement. Got to work with Molly White, and if you're familiar with her in this area, she recently passed away from cancer. I got to work with her on a cancer awareness campaign with Southeast Health, and so got to connect with her on a level with cancer. I hate cancer. I want to go into more detail on that on a whole other video, but this is where the whole campaign kind of comes full circle with the statement of, and I'm still here. I always picture that statement with ... and I'm still here. That no matter what life throws at me, I'm still here. There's a reason why I'm here. At times I don't know why. And that's just being real. Like I live life in a sense like day by day. Like I do have future plans. I've got goals that I want to hit. But at the same time, I'm just like, what's going on with my life that I'm still here? People like Molly White are taken early. How is that fair? How does that make sense? But if I'm still here, there's got to be a reason. There's got to be something going on to where I'm still around, I'm alive, I'm able to I don't know, do campaigns like this where I hope that it makes a difference for somebody. To wrap up this video, what I want to leave off with is that I want to open up a platform for others to be able to share their story. I want it to be with people that have gone through near-death experiences, that have struggled with, why am I given a second chance? Why am I still here? I've already had some conversations with people, and this is again like why I feel like it's so important for just to get this thing launched off and going. I envision this coffee book, photo book that is going to be placed around different places of town, whether it's at a coffee shop, a doctor's office. I want people to open up this book and see the person's portrait on this side and then read a brief story about their experience over here. But then also have a link or QR code with a full video talking about their whole experience so you can hear their full story. The heart of this is to, again, just give a platform to people to let them know that they are not alone in their struggles. I struggle on a regular basis of why I'm still here. I, at times, just imposter syndrome, I guess, is one of those things you could label it as. If I'm still here, there's got to be a purpose, so let's figure that out together. In the coming time, I don't know how long this whole thing's going to go on for, but my goal for the short term is to find 10 people that I can have to be part of this first volume. I have a feeling that this is going to do well, that it's going to make an impact in some way, that I'm going to be able to make different volumes. And so for this first one, I want 10 people. I also envision, and I'm looking over this way because that part of my studio is set up to be like a gallery. So I want to see, as you walk in, these 10 people, part of that gallery experience. If you fit into this whole "and I'm still here" category, that's a category. That's a horrible way to say that. If you can identify with this, let me know. There's an application form that you can fill out. I'd love to hear your story, regardless if you are wanting to be part of this coffee table book or not, or part of the video interviews. Man, I've had this in my head for so long that it's just time to get this done. I can't wait to learn about other people's experiences. I can't wait to learn from their experiences. And I can't wait to see how their stories can add value to someone else's life.